topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Sports for kids in America began with what we affectionately called sandlot ball, where kids organized their own games, made their own rules, and played until the sun went down. Then came along parents.
I'm gonna get you tonight because you let me down, brother.
No, I'm not.
You did. I don't give what you do. You let me down. I don't care if you're gonna play 100%. I'll get you, buddy. Cry about that.
Every time I see it, my blood curdles. But I'm just happy this morning we've got a real special guest, the Easton, Georgia Flash, Ross Smith. But yeah, Ross, I'm going to play something first, if you don't mind, just to kind of set the mood for the deal. But yeah, I did a post for Huffington Post, and they recorded it. So I want you to hear this just for a second, a couple minutes, and we'll get together.
Before Fred Eng founded the National Alliance for Youth Sports, he had a wealth of experience dealing with kids in sports. When his kids started playing baseball, he knew about win-at-all-cost coaches, especially those that were the parents of one of the kids on the team. After all, he was the director of an organization that included 15,000 kids playing all sports year-round, from boys football to girls softball. One day he wanted to see for myself if these horror stories were true. So, on a Saturday morning, he decided to check things out and go to a game being played in his neighborhood. The teams playing were 8- and 9-year-olds. On the mound was the son of a coach who was one of the thousands of dads in America who are out there coaching their kid in baseball every year. Around the third inning, he noticed that the 9-year-old pitcher was grabbing his elbow after each pitch. In the next inning, it got worse, as he was holding his arm against his chest with a grimace on his face. He was obviously in a lot of pain. His father just kept yelling at him to get it over the plate. Suddenly, the umpire stopped the game and called for the father to come to the mound. Since he was seated along the first base line, he could hear the whole conversation between the umpire and the dad. The umpire said to the father, "Your son is in obvious pain, and I think it would be wise to take him out of the game." The dad responded by saying, "He's my son, and if I want him out of the game, it's up to me, not you." At that point, the boy begins crying out loud and says, "But Dad, my arm hurts." The dad responded, "Son, I've told you that this is a man's game. Now get in there and pitch." At that point, the umpire called the game and said to the dad, "I refuse to allow you to abuse this kid like that. Game over." Fred said he had heard physicians say, on more than one occasion, that organized sports for kids is one of our nation's greatest examples of child abuse. Without communities demanding that there is a system in place to remove coaches like the above, then the horror stories will continue, and the Tommy John surgeries will continue to soar.
Yeah, you heard it. And, you know, I am so happy to have Ross on our show today. He's kind of the poster guy for starting out at the youth level and then going all the way up to signing a contract with the major leagues. So, Ross, I want to thank you for being here today. I know you're really busy in what you're doing there at the pro shop. And it's just a stroke of luck that I talked to you and asked you what you did and your background. So do me a favor and tell the audience a little bit about your background.
Sure, absolutely. Well, first, Fred, I want to say thank you for inviting me on and having me here, giving me the opportunity to kind of, spread a little bit of knowledge about kind of what's going on in the youth, sports world as far as just what I've seen and, in my opinion. So thanks for having me. Background is, in a nutshell, is all sports related. Your prototypical, I think, jock category growing up, where my first word was ball. My dad was a baseball player collegiately and then professionally. My mom was a Division I basketball player, and then went on and did 30 years of high school varsity coaching. She's in the Georgia High School Sports Hall of Fame for that. My dad is in the Georgia Dugout Club for his professional scout experience that he did. He retired about 6 or 7 years ago with the St. Louis Cardinals after 29 years. So sports and anything round and competitiveness, and even as much as on the business side of how things go, I've kind of had a firsthand experience with it for majority of my life. So seeing it firsthand, it's around. It's a real thing.
It's amazing to hear what you're talking about, being in the Hall of Fame with your dad and George. I noticed reading up about you that you were All-American in the state of Georgia.
Yes.
And but one of the things, Ross, that always intrigues me about baseball or whatever particular sport is, when did you start? When was the first time you had a bat in your hand? You're going out and learning to play the game. How old were you?
For me, like I said, my first word was ball. So I don't remember this, but my parents have video, old VHS video of me going out in the backyard and putting one of those big white balls on one of those huge old plastic tees and having the huge red bat that was as big as your head. And you take a swing. They said I was doing it from both sides of the plate when I was 2 years old. So I guess I started at a very young age. Obviously, I think by sight. Because I saw my dad being so engulfed in it and stuff like that. But then as I got older, I found the passion for it myself. So I would say 2 years old was when I first started.
So you saw, in the thing in right in the beginning and talking about parent there throwing, just kids throwing the ball and grabbing his arm. And I remember that very clearly, seeing that. And I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. And it's one of the reasons that I got into doing what I'm doing, but saying somebody's got to do something about this.
Yeah.
When we got into training coaches. But tell me, during your period of time there, up until when you signed with the Cardinals,
Mm-hmm.
You had to see something in your youth league level where parents and coaches got out of whack and being abusive a lot of times. You have any stories you remember?
Very much so. Pretty similar to the video that we had to kind of be prefaced with, in a sense of a kid was showing you openly that he was hurting, and the pride or ego or whatever it is of the adults kind of got in the way of that and wouldn't be realistic to the human being, and just kind of ignored it and said that, basically called him soft for wanting to come out and trying to teach them to stay in there, as opposed to, listening to your body and understanding that being a human and I'm hurt and you need to do something about it. That judgment goes out the window when the pride and ego gets involved, and they just say, no, you're tougher than that, get it done. And in my opinion, that's wrong a lot of the times in the situations.
Now, I remember talking to you the other day about the time I was on an airplane with a guy that was similar to your situation, but he was already in the minor leagues, and we just happened to start talking, like kind of you and I started talking about the other day. And he said something that really stunned me. He said when he was coaching or playing baseball in high school, he said almost all the guys that pitched when he was pitching have had Tommy John surgery. It's so funny. Well, it's not funny, but I was reading the paper yesterday about a local kid that's one of the star pitchers of one of the high school teams, and he can't compete in the state championship because he got to have Tommy John surgery. So in your career and seeing all that, I'm sure you had a lot of kids that were, damaged rather, in that Tommy John.
Very much so. What's crazy is that number that I say hypothetically I have in my head when I was playing then is probably close to triple to what to today. And I there's a few factors I think that contribute to that. One of those being, the demand for such a high success right now in the world. that mentality of what have you done for me lately and what can you do for me tomorrow, as opposed to, this is a long-term sport and it takes a while for you to develop, not only physically as a human, but in this sport. And people kind of want to cut corners and they want to, they want to do cheat shots with that. And you pay the price ultimately with your kid and his injury, because the body can only take so much. And as much as we want things to be different, there are higher powers at play that say that that's not allowed because the body can only take so much.
Yeah, one of the interesting things about the fact that you're from the state of Georgia, when we started our organization, the National Alliance for Youth Sports, Georgia, the state of Georgia, was the first state to adopt and implement our program throughout the whole state. And there in Georgia, they have what is called the Youth Baseball Association, the Georgia Youth Baseball, and different than any other state in the country, because the local recreation departments control the program. They organize it, they play, and I'm sure you probably played in that program in Eastman.
That's correct. That's correct.
Well, with that, here we have now across the country a thing called travel teams. It's nothing new, but it's travel teams. And it is kind of in other areas of the country destroyed that, because that destroyed the local program of where the rec departments run the program, the parents organize the leagues and whatnot. Now you got these so-called professionals that come in and run the whole program, recruit the best kids in the area, and what happens is they go to the rec department and lease the fields, which means the local kids that are not, talented kids can't get a chance to play. What do you think about that?
I think it's very silly. Fred, I think that if me and you were in conversation, just person to person, I think I would have used different words with that. That's a little upsetting, strikes a chord with me, to where I myself, I am not a father. And so when I got into coaching and, pursuing teaching the sport that I love, that kind of put me, along the path of my life, I found out just how quote unquote crooked it kind of is, to where these, the parents are being too much to their kids. And so they're creating this level of what we call daddy ball, of either you got to get it done and I think you're good enough, and if I don't know you, you're not going to play because you're not my son. Or you get into this travel ball world that you're talking about, where you get guys such as myself that, again, get their ego and their pride in the way to where they have to win games right now, and they don't care about your son, or much less about his physical, body staying together. They want to see what you can do for them now, so that way they can win the game, as opposed to taking care of the kid and worrying about his development and his future.
Yeah, but I said in the beginning, excuse me, you're kind of one of the poster guys for this whole thing about where athletes start out with these dreams, and like you just said, the parent or whoever it is even in travel leagues telling them, you can reach all the way up to the major leagues, but yet the statistics show that less than 2% of the kids that sign a major league contract ever end up playing in the major leagues. Mm-hmm. And you're the perfect example of that. What is your thought now that you went through all of that? And I'm sure you had hopes and dreams of getting to that level, and you got just there, but not there.
Right. It teaches you some humbleness, some maturity along the way, because, for a lot of the guys that have aspirations that reach the minor league level, obviously through your sandlot years and then, into your high school and collegiate years, if you go that route, all you want to be is a professional, and not just a professional. You want to be a big leaguer. You got different versions and mindsets of people that, they want to be an everyday major league starter. You got some guys that are just blessed that I'll be happy if I just make the big leagues. And then you got guys that say, I'm not good enough if I'm not in the Hall of Fame when it's all said and done. So, there's different mindsets to these, different individuals. For me personally, that I can really speak on, I was a little bit harder on myself in a sense of, it was very grateful and blessed now that it's over, looking back at it, that I went as far as I did. but when you hold yourself to a certain standard, it definitely can look like a version of a failure when you didn't reach, like you said, I got there, but I didn't get there, so to speak. But I wouldn't trade it for the world, and I don't regret any of it. Like I said, I'm grateful for it because I use it in my, my life now, and it's helped me immensely get to where I'm at.
So what do you think you learned from that whole experience, starting as young as 6 years old? You went to that level. What did it teach you in the long run?
You're not as good as you think you are.
Wow. Wow.
Period.
And, well, that's interesting you say that, and you said it so quickly, which means you really mean it to the full degree. So when you see so many players out there, so many fathers and the elite people that are promising, what do you want to say to them? The same thing?
Just be real. Just be realistic. That's all. I don't think I'm asking for too much, but for example, if a kid throws an X amount of pitch miles an hour, he's going to tell you that it's probably 2 or 3 to 4 miles an hour harder than it really is. So, I mean, just like any story that has a little fabrication to it to make themselves or that story sound better, if you could just be realistic with yourself, I think you would advance much further, or at least you'll get as far as you were supposed to in the sport. I think a lot of guys expect or don't put in what they should, and they expect to be more or get farther or whatever have you. And that's not the case. The sport's a beautiful thing in my opinion. And what I mean is it's a thing. It's not a person. It doesn't have feelings. It doesn't really care what color you are, where you come from, who your parents are, and all that. In the youth world and all that, those politics, they come into play. And sadly, like that takes away from the beauty of the sport where, like I said, it doesn't have feelings. It's going to be here after us. It was here before us. My point being is that if you're realistic with who you are, you'll get to the point of where you should be in the sport.
If you had to say there were 3 things that you learned from your career playing baseball, what would they be?
One, first and foremost, be humble. You're not as good as you think. Keep your head down, grind, work at whatever it is that you're doing every day, daily. 2, understanding failure, or that, like, not being afraid of it, not shying away or feeling embarrassed by it, but in turn looking forward to the next opportunity to quote unquote fail, because all I need is opportunity after opportunity, and eventually I'll get it figured out. I may not go 4 for 4 today, I may go 0 for 4 today, but if I keep the same head, mindset, and ability, work ethic, and I take that into tomorrow, then who's to say that I can't be 4 for 4 and then I'm 4 for 8 batting 200 after 2 days? Having that forward thought and that mindset to not be upset immediate and right then, I think is probably my 3rd point, is that learning how to deal with failure and looking at it as opportunities gets you more patient and more ready and available for the next thing you're about to encounter.
So you're saying that the whole experience in sports, and I know you played other sports,
Sure,
taught you a lot.
very much so. And I will say one thing deeper, more specific, team sports taught me a lot. Team sport versus an individual sport, I think, is different. And as far as what you learn and can take away from it, the team aspect and the team concept, it really does something to somebody's psyche and their mentality as they grow older.
Yeah, that's so great. It's been wonderful hearing these comments from you. I never thought we'd do this like this and get so much out of what I really want people to hear. And I want them to know we've been talking to Ross Smith from Eastman, Georgia, and Ross has been the typical person that we talk about in the sports that can start at the beginning and work his way up through the whole system and enjoy the value of what it brings to you as an individual. And it doesn't need to mean that you're going to have to make it to the top level to be successful. So, Ross, I want to thank you again. It's a great job you did today.
You're very welcome. Again, I thank you very much for having me on, Fred. This has been a blast, and let me know when we can do it again, okay? I'm ready to do it.
Okay, man. Thanks again.
You're very welcome. Take care.
You too.
Fred Ang's Billy Jones's Father is more than just a story about a boy and his father. It's an eye-opening journey into the emotional struggles faced by children in the world of competitive sports. As you turn the pages, you'll see how unrealistic expectations and unchecked ambitions can shape, mold, and sometimes break a child's spirit. This book dives deep into the human experiences that resonate with so many and calls on us to reflect on the roles we play in the lives of young athletes.
This program is sponsored by Sir Durf Publishing in the interest for better sports for kids. Better Kids for Life.
In this best-selling book, a child, while failing to live up to his father's expectations, is shamed and humiliated beyond belief. He vows to never allow his own son to face the same.